right, we are about to start. Please take your seats. I'll just give it 30 more seconds. Yeah, I'll wait. I guess they're hungry, right? So, hi everybody, and a warm welcome to what I hope will be an inspiring and interactive session about on-site solar. My name is Ekblom, and I will be the moderator for this session. I'm the head of marketing and customer experience at Alight, and I've actually been in the on-site solar market myself since 2017, with Alight, working with corporates as our responsible for our customer success unit. So with me today, I have a beautiful panel consisting of no less than 4 presenters. And I would go as far as saying that their collective experience and knowledge within this area cover basically all the perspectives that you need to consider when doing on-site solar. And you will hear more as they present themselves shortly. Before the panel discussion starts, we will also hear a short presentation outlining the potential for on-site solar and also contradicting some of the most common preconceptions about it. But it's not just going to be the panel here talking today, but we also want you in the audience to be a part of this. And we will do that by using live polls in the session to include your perspectives. All right, without further ado, I would like to introduce the first speaker in the panel. And I'll start with Natalia from Geronimo Martins, who will give us the buyer perspective.
Hello, good morning. My name is Natalia Romska-Żuk, and I'm energy manager for Geronimo Martins, which is very well known in Poland as Biedronka stores. We are the biggest retailer here, and we have more than 3,000 stores and distribution centers in Poland. Hello.
All right. Next up, actually, we'll take you the last Johan, but sorry, not least, but last. Przemyslaw. So, Przemyslaw from RS Legal, you will give us the legal and the regulatory perspective.
That's correct. Dzień dobry Państwu, Przemysław Kalek,
Przemysław Kalek, partner legal advisor, energy law, Radzikowski-Strubielska Law Office.
Zajmuję się prawem energetycznym i doradztwem dla sektora energetycznego już policzyłem ostatnio ponad 20 lat. Z częścią z Państwa miałem tę przyjemność i mam cały czas współpracować, także przy kwestiach związanych z energetyką odnawialną i także z budową i ze sprzedażą energii elektrycznej i handlem energią elektryczną.
Thank you, Przemyslaw. And then actually there has been a slight change in the panel. So Marcin was unfortunately not able to join today, but instead we have Simon from ONDE who will provide the technical perspective.
Yes, thank you. As you can see, I'm not Marcin. I'm just the replacement. I hope I can handle the technical part. ONDE actually is well known from being EPC in utility scale sector, especially for wind and solar. And we started also this year a new business related to commercial and industrial rooftop PV. Yeah, that's it. And we believe that it will evolve into something quite pretty in Poland.
Thank you, Simon. And now, last but not least, Johan from Alight, who brings the developer perspective. Johan will start by introducing further the potential for on-site solar in Poland and also contradicting some of the most common preconceptions about on-site solar. So the stage is yours.
Thank you, Ellen. Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for inviting me and Ellen and my fellow panelists to speak to you today. It is great to be here. My name is Johan Hernström. I work as a client executive at Alight. So I help customers across Europe that want to switch to solar energy. And it's great to be here for several reasons. To begin with, it feels important. I mean, 70% of world electricity is consumed by corporates, and with Poland having one of the more vital economies of the European Union, I think there's no better place than to be here today talking to you about this important transition. And second, I love Warsaw. I've actually been here, I tried to calculate, it's 33 or 34 times. In my previous career, I helped set up a teleradiology clinic here in Warsaw, and every time we came, we hired the same tour guide for our customers. So after a while, I started learning the script almost by heart and remember all the jokes as well, that he never changed, by the way. So maybe that can be a fallback career for me if this career fails. So I thought that I'd start by introducing Alight in 30 seconds, and then follow up with our view on sort of why and how we think on-site solar can be one of the key building blocks in the European energy transition, and a real win for corporates that choose to engage. So, Alight was founded 8 years ago with a sort of ambition and clear strategic vision to lead the subsidy-free market for solar in Europe. So we offer solar as a service that can either be through PPA or lease, depending on country and jurisdiction, both on-site and off-site. And this is the only thing we do. And we have done so since we started. We built 50 assets to date, and I'm personally involved in projects across Europe, but in Sweden, Spain, UK, Italy, and here in Poland. Let's see if this works. So, okay, I would like to start at the resource event in Amsterdam last year, where we hosted a session similar to this one with a panel discussion on on-site solar. And when we talked to buyers about what is holding them back in terms of deploying more on-site solar, this is sort of what they said. It's a drip in the ocean, it's not worth it, it's time-consuming given the output. And I think many of you buyers would recognize this as well. So what we hope to do today is to address some of these preconceptions, myself and my fellow panelists, because in looking at the solar deployment data for Europe and for Poland, and in working with companies that have taken the decision to deploy on-site solar, we find that it is not a drip in the ocean, and that it can be a real key building block in the energy transition, and that the sustainability values are clear, the financial business case is really good, especially in Poland. And sort of while it can be complex at times to sort of align internal stakeholders and get the necessary permits, there are ways around it. And that is sort of what we would like to discuss with you today. So let's start looking at the data. So according to Solar Power Europe, the most cost-efficient path to reach the EU Fit for 55 agenda and to stay on track to the Paris Agreement requires 45% renewable electricity by 2030. And to achieve this, we need to produce 1,200 terawatt-hour of wind and 1,150 terawatt-hour of solar. That is 8 times as much solar as we had in 2020. And I guess that might not be a surprise to anyone in this room, that wind and solar needs to deploy massively in Europe in this decade. So what about on-site solar? So according to the same scenario, on-site solar is expected to contribute with almost half of the required build-out until 2030. And this, I think, maybe is a little bit surprising. I was surprised myself to see these numbers, that on-site C&I could contribute more than utility-scale PV in Europe. And if you look at data from Resource, on-site C&I in Poland could deliver 30 terawatt-hour by the end of this decade. So the potential is quite big, and I think one can conclude that that is not a drip in the ocean, not on EU level and not in Poland. And we think that this can be sort of partly explained by some of the inherent characteristics of on-site solar. So if we look at some of the sustainability values, so first, I mean, this is quite simplistic, but you utilize unused space. And according to analysts, there is enough space or rooftop available in the EU to build 1,500 terawatt hours, which is 3 times as much as is needed until 2030. So not only is it resource efficient to utilize unused space, It helps with social acceptance, which is quite an important enabler in the energy transition. And also, as was mentioned earlier today, there is a limited supply of off-site projects. So the space is there, the consumption is under the roof. So what's there not to like? Second is it's also efficient from a grid perspective, as you have grid losses of around 7%. And together with storage, you can help decongest the grid and then partly mitigate at least the required build-out of new capacity. And also, as was discussed, having a distributed system of production capacity has certain advantages from a resilience perspective. And then matching production with consumption is hour by hour, as you produce and consume, is a hot topic in the energy sector, as you know, and by many claimed to be the next frontier in renewable energy sourcing. Google calls it its biggest moonshot sustainability target yet. And this is sort of inherent to the on-site model. And then finally, and maybe most important, deployment is fast. We can talk about it later, but time to market can be under 12 months from decision to commission. And that means CO2 reduction now rather than later, which is really key in the transition. So we have clear sustainability values, but we think there is another key reason why this will be a central building block in the energy transition, and that is that corporates can save money, and they can save money from day one, and the business case is especially good in Poland. So this is data from an actual case that I'm working on here in Poland for a manufacturing company. It is an asset, behind the meter asset, 1.5 megawatts, produces north of 1.5 gigawatt hours per year, a 15-year as a service contract. So if you first sort of look at the mechanics of this business case, on the left-hand side, you see that you are offsetting not only, as probably many of you know, you're not only offsetting the electricity cost component, but there is a non-commodity cost component that you're offsetting, peak costs, capacity fees, distribution costs, etc. And in 2023, that is forecasted to be in total north of 750 zloty. And in this specific case, this customer can buy the electricity for 325 zloty. So it's pretty good. But I mean, the electricity market is extreme at the moment. So especially the electricity component of the cost stack will come down, but it is expected to be high for some time. So savings year one for this case, 600,030 zloty, and over 10 years, 4 million zloty. So excuse if this is a bit salesy, but it is an important enabler, we think. There needs to be a financial case behind taking a decision that really supports the business. And especially for companies that have where electricity is a high portion of the cost of goods sold. And on top of that, you have the sort of hedging properties of locking in your price long term. So, okay, we have concluded that on-site can be a key building block in the energy transition. There's clear sustainability values. It's a really great business case, day one. Then over time, we believe there's an even greater case to unlock untapped potential at the future C&I site with increased electrification, EV charging, intelligent energy management systems, storage, etc. So we think it makes sense today, it makes sense tomorrow, but if you look at the sort of current build-out and of pace and pledges, we're only on track to achieve between 500 to 700 terawatt hours of solar by 2030, which tells me we're building too little of off-site projects and on-site projects. So that is really the backdrop to our panel discussions. What is holding us back in deploying and accelerating on-site at an even higher pace? So with that, Ellen,
thank you.
Continue.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so it's in our hands to untap the full potential of on-site solar. I mean, C&I buyers and suppliers can make this happen, and that's why we wanted to use this session to facilitate a discussion around what is it that's holding us back and what are the key success factors in overcoming those barriers. But before we start discussing what's holding us back, I want to have a quick look at where we are today, and I want to start doing that by inviting you in the audience to the first live poll. So now we're praying for technology to work. Okay. Can you click? So this was the last one. Yeah, instructions, exactly, thanks. So the way this is going to work, please scan the QR code with your mobile device. So you have the QR code there, you find it on the screens over there. It's also printed on the chairs. So scan it on your mobile device and then you will get the first question. So I'll just give you a few seconds to scan first. I see the updates here. I see some people are still scanning, so I'll give you a few more seconds before we click the first question. Okay, now it's been standing still for a while. So, can you please show the first question? So my first question to you is, how much experience do you have from on-site solar? And I mean, this can obviously be experience either from a buyer perspective, or if you're a supplier, advisor, private enthusiast. Okay. I'll give you a few more seconds to vote before I share the final results. Seems like most people either are just getting started or don't have any experience yet. So, I mean, you're obviously in the right session, and hopefully this session will provide you with the hands-on advice, and together we can accelerate the deployment. Let's see if, yeah, I think we can call it done. So, now over to you, my dear panelists, and I want to start with you, Natalia. Do you want to share a little bit more about Geronimo Martin's on-site initiatives, and what would you say have been the main drivers behind your decision to go for on-site solar?
Yes, sure. So, as I said before, we are the biggest retailer in Poland. We have more than 3,000 stores, and Biedronka stores are visible in all over the Poland. So, for sure, you know that we are aware of the impact that we make for the society. Sustainability is one of the pillars of our strategy, and we understand that this is also our corporate responsibility to take care about the environment. So actually, it's never been easier to recognize renewables as a very valuable asset. As we speak, the market and electricity prices are very volatile, and the utilities prices are also skyrocketing right now. So for the business, what is also important is to have awareness of the cost in the long term. So for us, PV or any other renewables which can give us the long-term stable and competitive price is a solution that we recognize a very useful one. And in that case, our projects right now regarding the on-site installations of photovoltaics are running, and we have already done 100 installations on our stores, and more are about to come. And we see the value, and we recognize PV on-site installations as a very useful and very valuable asset for our business.
Thank you. So what you're saying, basically, you have the two components. It's both the sustainability case, but also the hedge or the savings, essentially.
Yes, exactly. So in the long term, we can face the business, we can do the planning, because right now, as we all are aware, the market is very volatile and prices are skyrocketing.
Yeah, I recognize that. So it'd be interesting to hear, Johan, I mean, you talk to buyers on a daily basis, not just in Poland, but also in other European countries. Is this in line with what you hear? Do you recognize this?
Yes, I would say so. I think it's changed a little bit over time. So a few years ago, I mean, most corporates, they've always seen the green value in having panels on your roof, and sort of the concrete visible nature of your customers actually being able to see them and that you're doing something concrete. And then during the pandemic, this changed a little bit with low electricity prices, especially in the Nordics, where resilience came into the picture more and more, and that has sort of further accelerated now during the war in Ukraine. And then over the past, say, quarters, with electricity prices being really high, the business case is so good that it really helps. Helps the decision processes at the companies, which I think then what the effect of that. So what we see is that it has spread from B2C and maybe ICT to other sectors, and also sort of scope 3 pressure, especially in the automotive industry. So there's some sort of competitive advantage type of argument as well to do on-site solar. So it has changed a little bit, but now I would say the business case is quite central.
Thanks. And if we look at the options that buyers have available for on-site solar, I mean, Geronimo Martins, you obviously chose the rooftop solutions, you have the available roof space. But Simon, from a technical perspective, what are the options and how do you make sure you pick the right one?
Okay, roof is first choice, and typically it's the optimal solution for the on-site installation. If there is no technical limitation related to the construction of the roof itself, I mean regarding the static and dynamic pressure and load, and also some consumption is related to the building on which roof we are building the solar generator, it is the optimal solution because of obvious reason. We are using unused space, like was mentioned before, and we are using the energy locally with the shortest path of between the load and the generator itself. But sometimes it is impossible because of the maybe space limitation, because of the technical limitation to install the generator, the PV generator on the roof. And then we have few options which are suboptimal typically, but the only options. So we have ground-mounted installation which is nearby, and it is on the plot owned by the consumer. So we can consider this local, and the consumer regarding, for instance, the tax identification is the same as the producer. So we are avoiding some administrative problems. So ground-mounted, and then ground-mounted can be extrapolated to few options. For instance, it can be high GCR, ground coverage ratio, ground-mounted if we have limited space. Or we want to avoid environmental painful process, so we want to use less space for the same installed power. Also we can merge a little bit local consumption and ground-mounted using carports. So we can use locally produced electricity to charge the batteries of our electrical vehicles, which should be our bright future, I hope. And those are, I think, the ground-mounted, local and carports are two other options than roof. And roof itself can be also divided to flat roof and maybe with a better exposure, and we can also think about better density. But it depends strongly on the consumption profile. We should always think about the local generation as a way to cover a part of local consumption. And then the importance of the feasibility study came to play, and we need to consider that.
Thank you. So, in essence, I mean, if you have a good roof, start there, but the ground mount and the carport can be good options given that the local, or that you have the right conditions, I guess.
Definitely.
Thanks.
With the prices, yeah.
And the prices. So, in terms of the available business models, I mean, given the regulatory landscape in Poland today, Przemek, what options do C&I customers have when it comes to business models?
Not many. We already heard during the previous panels that we have some issues, or challenges connected with direct line or private wire in Poland. Actually, I was involved in one of the first, or even the first court dispute connected to regarding direct line back in 2005, and at that time I saw what was the approach of the regulatory authority, and it hasn't changed over the years. So still I would say that the direct line or private wire, that I produce electricity and then sell it to my neighbor because I have a surplus. I sell it to my neighbor is not possible in the current regulatory environment, because from the perspective of the regulatory authority and I suppose also government, allowing this without changing the grid financing is not the way to do it, because it needs to be combined. So direct line together with some grid fees or network fees imposed on such electricity delivered through the direct line. This is the way it will be accepted. That's my opinion. So direct line is not an option. Behind the meter corporate PPA, so a third party builds a PV installation on the side of a customer and then sells electricity to the customer behind the meter, which means no transport to the national power grid. It's also not possible, because under the Polish energy law we have this famous Article 5 saying that any delivery of electricity is permitted after connection to the grid. So connection to the grid is a requirement to have an energy sale agreement. So this is not possible, and above that we have also this almost already famous interpretation or statement of the regulatory authority from February 2021, saying that any agreements between the owner of the PV installation and then the customer, which are based on which provide for a cooperation under which the PV owner does not sell the electricity but provides some maintenance or support or operation services, but then gets paid for the volume of electricity delivered, is considered by the energy regulatory a breach of the law, because to do it, according to the Energy Regulatory Authority, you need to have a not only trading license, but also a distribution license. And if not, we have a new article in energy law. If you breach this obligation, then you will pay a lot of a fine amounting to 5 million zloty. So this is not an easy decision to do it. So the model we have now for an on-site cooperation is self-consumption, but is also allowed to have a partner who will support you in this model.
Thank you. That does sound complex indeed, and glad to have you here on the panel. We'll discuss a bit more shortly as to how you can structure that from a legal point of view. But I think it's time to invite the audience again to the next poll. So we will now start the discussion around what is it that's holding us back and what are the key success factors to overcome those barriers. So what I would like you to go in and vote on now is, what do you think is holding you back now with regards to on-site solar? I can see some are still voting, so I'll give you a few more seconds. It seems, I mean, the top two, permitting process and regulatory uncertainty, both legal, regulatory issues. So again, very happy to have you here today, Przemyslaw. Then what I see also is financial value and site condition equally challenging or equally holding back. Yeah, I'll leave that on. So those of you who still didn't vote, I mean, we won't close the votes, so you still have the chance to do it. But I'll start again with you, Natalia. I mean, looking at these challenges or these barriers, what would you say have been the most challenging for you? And do you have any advice on how you managed to overcome that?
So when I look at the results, I need to say that I feel for you and for us, because actually the first and second result is something what we also notice on the market. So permitting process, regulatory uncertainty, it's something what is definitely a bottleneck for the projects like on-site PV installations. I have to say that also for us, the complexity of the process is also a challenge, because when we are talking about the huge scale of the installation, so not only the amount of the power which we are going to install, but also the complexity of the process and number of the installations, it becomes more and more difficult.
Yeah.
So we need to take care also about the project management, how we see the process, because we cannot just simply skip the administration. So we need to follow all the regulations. We need to submit for all necessary permits, building permits, already mentioned zone planning, so it's also a part of this process. And especially right now, during the current geopolitical situation, we also notice that its supply chain it's something what can also interrupt the project because of the availability of the equipment. We saw on the market that, for instance, the technically assessed equipment, inverters, panels, what we had for our projects are becoming more difficult to be available for the customers. So we need to be flexible as well. So we need to change the technical requirements sometimes to adjust to the market, to follow and to achieve the goals that we have.
Thank you. I'm a little bit curious about the project management, because you said you've done more than 100 installations, so you must have some good advice, I'm hoping, with regard to project management and how you maybe involve the stakeholders in your organization and facilitate a good decision process.
Yes, that's very important. I would say that my advice would be to do the pilot. So maybe to see in small scale the characteristics of the business. So what is necessary, how we can implement PV without interruption of the business core, because this is something additional. So we need to deliver for business, not to interrupt the business. So simply do the Gantt chart and analyze step by step what is required, what needs to be done, what is the timeline, because as we all know, when we are talking about a huge scale and the delays can interrupt everything at the same time, we know that we have 30 days, DSO has 30 days to give us permission to start up the installation, so everything needs to be very carefully planned.
So Gantt schemes and pilot, I take
Yes,
that
I
with
would
me.
say.
Thank you. And I'd like, maybe you, Johan, can comment on it, because I know that you've also worked on projects where the installations, they're actually in multiple countries. So how do you manage that complexity? Is it like 3 times as complex, or what's your advice there?
This result is quite interesting, because we did the similar, we had a similar question in Amsterdam, and their internal project management scored really high. And I think that is probably my experience as well when we do sort of multi-country, multi-site type of rollouts. So typically you have a central team. It can be procurement, sustainability, energy, that sort of drives the process. And then you have the local team. It's a site manager, facility manager, what have you. And they're focused on different things. So the central team, they're typically focused on the value, be it emission reductions or the business case. And the local team is focused on risks, as you said, Natalia. How will this affect my operations? You penetrate the roof, will it start leaking, etc. And then on top of that, you have sort of the legal aspects, accounting treatment. So it's in most of these projects that I'm involved in, I will probably score internal project management quite high from my perspective. So what we try to do is to run workshops to align stakeholders as early as possible. So maybe if we were to do this in a few years, that would score higher. I don't know, but
Okay,
that is my
yeah.
experience.
Yeah. All right. Should we spend some time on the regulatory uncertainties? Przemek, what's your advice? I mean, buyers who are interested in the as a service model and also in mitigating the regulatory uncertainty, how can that be incorporated in a contract?
Wow, that's 2 hours. Do we have 2 hours?
Okay.
No, the regulatory aspect is quite complex, because, as I already said, we have this. The approach of the regulatory authority is quite strict. So the only way we can structure a cooperation between the partners is to have a contract based on a service, a certain service provided by the partner who builds the PV installation or other installation on site, and then provides some specific services and specific know-how, and it's paid for these services during the term of the contract. What we know is that this payment cannot be connected to the volume of electricity produced by the given installation, because this is considered by the regulatory authority as illegal. So from my perspective, this is the only way the cooperation could work in current environment, provided that the energy law changes and we will have, I don't know what, direct line. I don't think this will replace the proper on-site project, but currently this is the only way to do it.
I mean, if you feel that this is uncertain, is there a point in waiting?
No, I would not say waiting, because we've been already waiting for years for a solution or for a change to the energy law, allowing this kind of cooperation. So I would say doing this and hoping that in a midterm something will change, because it needs to be done according to the European legislation. But I don't think this is a short term. In a short term, this is something we should hope for.
Thank you. Okay. So what else do we have? Site conditions. Let's spend some time on that. Shimon, my first question goes to you. What type of roof or site is typically good for a solar installation? And what do you look at in a feasibility study?
The infrastructure on the roof is definitely one of the most important elements, and also the purpose of the building itself. So obviously we are looking for sources of the shadow, and of course, like I mentioned before, if the roof is stable enough and construction is strong enough to hold the pressure and handle the statics parameters of the installation, then roof should be our obvious choice. And if it's our obvious choice, then we are looking for the sources of the shadow and the optimized distances to provide, of course, the proper maintenance of the infrastructure itself. I mean, the access to the cables and to the generator for easier replacement. And a flat roof, in this case, the maintenance should be cheaper because the access is easier and you can predict and design the access better for the flat roof. But flat roof is also less productive per unit power, at least, and that should be also considered because it will affect the LCOE, the levelized cost of electricity for this installation. So if we have sufficient area, considering our consumption on the roof, that we can also optimize the exposure, the angle, then it's also meeting our consumption profile correctly, considering the prices in each hour or our tariff. This is also quite important, because there is no sense to generate electricity in maximum value per unit power if this electricity has a low value on the market. So sometimes maybe it's better to generate more evening, because evening will be more expensive, considering the average price. So the feasibility studies first check the consumption, check the infrastructure on the roof, consider mounting systems which can be used. For instance, maybe only aerodynamic can be used for some roofs, because you cannot integrate something invasive. There's risk of leakage, or maybe there is some membrane. So then you can think about the reflectiveness, the albedo on the roof. Maybe you can use bifacial and bigger spaces. And also the cost of additional infrastructure, like lighting protection system, other stuff. If it's existing, if it's not existing, how the value of the installation increased the cost of the insurance in this case, because it will be integrated part of the building, it will increase the cost of the insurance, and maybe we need to install LPS, the lighting protection system in this case. So the feasibility study is quite complex, not so easy. We are also considering the OEM cost. I think on this pool, it's so low because of the previous pool, right? How the learning curve is at the beginning. So we don't know what's the OEM cost really. Everything is quite new.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Good
So
point.
that's why, and I think the Netherlands is much more experienced in this case, and that's why they recognized all the issues related to the installation process itself, and then further O&M.
Yeah. And Natalia, how did you do it? Because, I mean, you've done a lot of installations. How did you prioritize the sites to go for? How did you make that decision?
So for us, it's quite simple because Jeronimo Martins takes a lot of effort on a yearly basis to also remodel the stores and to reduce the energy intensivity, increase energy efficiency. So this is our first choice. So the stores that will be remodeled. And of course, we also need to do the feasibility study where we will assess the solar conditions and the technical assessment of the roof. And if the building is available, then we will go for it.
Thanks. And then there's the question, what do you do if you don't own the site? Johan, do you want to take that one?
Yes, that's a good question because it is often the case that you lease your warehouse or store or what have you. So it's not a deal breaker, but what you typically want to have is a horizon of, say, at least 10 years. We typically don't sign PPAs or operational lease contracts, as here in Poland, for less than 10 years. So what our customers then do in prioritizing the sites is they look at the sites where they have at least a 10-year horizon, either 10 years left on the lease or they have a plan to extend. And then they get an okay from the property owner. And then in addition, if they're able to negotiate a clause such that the property owner sort of inherits the solar contract or the next leasee inherits the solar contract, or we as the solar company are allowed to go merchant, then that would improve the commercials. But so long as you have a sort of a 10-year horizon, there are ways around it.
Thanks. I see time is running away, and I know a lot of people in the audience are hungry for lunch, so I'm not going to keep you here longer than necessary. I just want to ask you for some closing remarks. I mean, it's clear that we need to deploy more solar and wind, not just in Poland, but also in the rest of Europe. And as you showed, Johan, on-site solar can play a role in this. What are your final advice to speed up the deployment? Anyone who wants to start? Do you want to go first, Natalia?
I would say that from the business perspective, from the buyer perspective, we've talked today about different models which are available on the market. And what I would like to emphasize is that, of course, there is a lot of potential in the Light as a service, and we need to deal with a lot of obstacles from the administrative point of view. But it's quite obvious for the business that the PV and renewable investments are capex intensive. So the model where we can find the external financing and to use the partners who are reliable and trusted, and they can provide us with the high quality installations that we can use for auto consumption is something which has very, very huge value for business. So I think that my advice would be not to wait, but to start works and analyze the process, define the goal for the business, what is needed actually, and what is the characteristics, whether it's a small or micro installation, what are the technical possibilities there. And also to do this and not to wait, try a pilot and in a small scale try to assess which business model is better.
Thank you. I think that's a great piece of advice. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, maybe just to repeat a little bit what we have been saying. So from a macro perspective, it can really be a key building block in sort of the energy transition, and it has distributed properties with resilience. And then from the buyer's perspective, we talk about sustainability, the business case, future-proofing. And given that there's a lack of off-site projects, I think it's available now, so just do it.
Don't wait.
No.
Any concluding remarks from you?
From the regulatory and legal point of view, I would say that waiting doesn't make sense because
I've been in this sector for 20 years. Regulatory environment was never certain. Permitting process was never easy. So having this in mind, on-site PV installation or on-site installations are the easiest to develop. So this is and it won't change.
Thank you.
How to close it from the technical perspective, that's quite tough. But I think right now the exposure on the price fluctuations for the industry is not sufficient. So they don't understand that basically the behavior, the plan, how your business is operating and how it's consuming the electricity is crucial here. So if you understand that, for instance, the peak generation for solar will also be a cause of lower prices per hour, then you can plan into your business. Your production can be related and optimized to the cost of electricity. Especially hour or maybe every 15 minutes exposure will be the good information to change the behavior. Of course, we have technical limitations like maximum connection power. We cannot just double the production in the noon. It's not possible, but we can think maybe to optimize the production more when the electricity is cheap and less maybe when the prices are high, and it can be quite predictable, even based on the spot market. You can plan it every 1 day in advance, and it will be much better, and it will limit your cost. The problem is right now our expectations, the consumer's expectation, is to have a stable fixed price, like a flat rate, if possible, and because everything else is uncomfortable. So my advice is we need to be used to be in uncomfortable position, actually. So it will be like that, and it will be more and more, and the exposure will be higher to the market prices, and we should plan from the technical perspective our consumption. The flexible consumption should meet the unflexible generation. Only way.
Thank you. So a sneak peek of your view of the future. I'm not going to keep you any longer. I just want to say thank you so much for your positive energy throughout this session. And I mean, on-site solar is an obvious evolution of the renewable energy landscape, and how fast that can happen depends on all of us. So hopefully this session has provided some hands-on advice and some good reasons for not to wait. So thank you, everyone.